Welcome to Camera Basics. Today you're going to learn about 3 separate elements as quick as possible so that you can get out shooting. To start off, shutter speed. First we're going to talk about shutter speed. Your shutter covers your sensor, so you're controlling how much light is going to hit your sensor. Imagine it like a pen and paper. The longer your pen is on the paper, the darker that dot is going to be. But the longer that you have your pen on the paper, the more risk there is of shaking the pen by accident or shaking the paper by accident, causing, instead of a dot, a shaky line. To continue with the pen analogy, imagine your pen is your camera and your paper is your subject. See, if you take an image at too slow of a shutter speed, like 1/10 of a second, your camera shake is actually going to make it so that the image looks shaky. Everything in the photo looks blurry. Conversely, if the subject is moving really quick and you have a slow shutter speed, they're gonna look blurry. So if you have a fast subject or shaky hands, you have to have a fast shutter speed so that you can catch that dot. Fast subject, higher shutter speed. But the longer your shutter is open, the more light is gonna hit your sensor. So for example, if I have my pen on the paper for one quick tap versus a long tap, there's more time for the ink to go into the paper and it's gonna make a darker spot. Same thing with light. If your shutter is open longer, the image is going to be brighter, but you risk more blur. If it's going quicker, it's going to be darker, but everything's going to be sharper. On this, as a side note, you're going to see a number on your lens. It might say 35, 50, 85. It might even give you a range. These tell you your focal length. We'll go over that in another video, but just try to keep your shutter above your focal length by a fair amount. Number 2. Aperture. Next we're going to talk about aperture, how much light gets actually to your sensor. The smaller the hole, the less light gets to your sensor, but that light goes through a pinhole, it becomes sharper. So, for example, right now, the background is in focus, I'm in focus. Let's go ahead and open up our aperture. Now, we have more light hitting your sensor, but less is in focus. My eye is in focus, but the background is completely gone. And by completely, I mean a little bit. It's f1.8, it's not that bright. The higher the number, the more in focus. The lower the number, the less in focus. For example, look at these 2 shots. One is taken at f11, the other is taken at f1.8. One of them looks way more cinematic, way more interesting. The higher the f number, the more is in focus, but the darker the image, because remember, we're closing this diaphragm. Next, ISO. Now imagine you have an MP3 player. It sounds nice, but it's far too quiet. So you plug it into an amp to increase the sound coming out of it. But as you turn up that sound artificially, it starts to get noisier and sound messier. This is the same thing with ISO. It's an amp for light. See, this image is far too dark. However, once we start using ISO, our light amp, it starts to get brighter, but it starts to get grainier. The higher the number, the more artificial light that we're pumping into it, the more our amp is working. People will actually shoot film because they love how the noise looks. Different cameras can have different qualities to their noise. So, sometimes noise isn't all bad. But how do you know? How do you know when you're supposed to use what? Boom, light meter. This bad boy. This is how you can tell if your image is going to be exposed correctly. See, on one side is going to be too dark, on the other is going to be too bright. So, what you have to do is make sure that this little notch is always right in the middle. As long as this notch is in the middle, you should be exposed correctly. However, what I've gone over today is just the basic, the 3 building blocks, the exposure triangle. As this goes on, there's more nuance and detail in each one of these elements. This is just a start. But thank you for watching, and God bless.